Hello and welcome back again to another episode. I did not expect to encounter a lot of the stuff that I encountered, but I started on this facade because I knew eventually someone was going to have to figure out how to put these batten together at 12 inches on center and make it work out to something that makes sense down here. The first thing, I had moved this door over and over to where it was no, and I moved this one simultaneously where it no longer was on the center of this center line of the roof. And that I did that because of that trim at the ceiling and the opening at the ceiling and the trim on the head of this door. But when I did that, I didn't move this window over yet for some of those other walkthroughs. So now it's moved over, and I played with that board and batten, and the one thing I did do is make sure that I got it where it was definitely 12 inches on center. Actually, this is when I got serious about making sure, and that's when they were. They are definitely 12 inches on center in this representation. The photographic representation is accurate, and now the vector is as well. But I did forget to make those two in alignment. But the short story is I ended up doing this from a vector view where I left nothing on this because there's nothing on the opposite side, on the north side, because that's just close enough to the window, and this is very close here. This is questionable here though, because this is these are 2-inch battens and this is a 3.5 inch piece of casing. These battens presumably would be that different color, that lighter color. So it might be best to do something like that and leave this middle one with nothing. This is if you want to keep that 12 inches on center exactly, which in some instances is going to be necessary to get the seams. I think this might be what this is what I did. And then those lights were, if I did this sort of situation, those lights were going to be too high. And and those doors, by the way, those can swing into the office as well, instead of up into that room. But I did not like this representation here, up in through here, and I only showed that once or twice. And that was painting everything the same color. And they're going to want some sort of railings here. These are iron railings that you could have made however. I like these doors. This situation of the doors I like a lot better than this. But obviously I like the cable railings. Those are available in just 2 or 3 colors. I got rid of that piece in the middle, and I went back to the last film. I thought we had surely covered this situation here. I went back to the last film, and the last thing I said in that was that should be it. But I looked at this as well, and I looked at several different other things with regard to that ceiling. And you will have to adjust that grade here. You can see the grade being adjusted to meet this 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, and just taking it 6.5 means that all the edge of all this concrete, I mean if you want to follow this, all the edge of all this concrete, the edges, has to be 6.5, so that we can get 6.5, 6.5, and 6.5 to grade. Last on the exposures from this side, and this is Monday morning after I came back to double check that mantelpiece and discovered that that chimney, that north wall of the chimney, can actually come back 3 3/8, and that is helpful, making that little alcove a little less deep. Even that 3 inches I think helps. You may think differently and like the chunkier chimney at the top, and it could be moved back. This back wall at the top could be moved back, but for now this is what I'm showing. Yeah, those are the different colors. And I thought one of them would work, but I chose black, and you saw the result. This was with regard to the height of that window over the sink and whether that should match the one out front. This is the door across the room, and this is the one if it matches the one out front up here, a couple inches higher. I left it low, and one of the reasons I left it low is because you wanted a fixture over that window, over the sink. So I wanted it a little bit lower for space between the bottom of that beam and the top of this window. And here they are, both the same height, and your fixture could be ceiling mounted as far as that goes. So here are both of the windows the same height, and there's about maybe 5 inches underneath that wooden sill. And that's the one with that 6 inches lower. And out here, that's a similar thing. And I actually I brought that down a brick course, whatever that brick course is going to be, 2.5 inches or so. That's what I brought that down. That makes it a little closer to the countertop inside, but that's what you were looking at that last photo, is with that sill brought down to 42 or so instead of 44. I don't know if you can tell here, but I brought this from 4 inches out to 8 inches. This part of this pilaster, and this column should be almost engaged. Everything but the backside of the trim should be engaged with the siding. It might not show that on the walkthrough, but that's the idea. That gives us the look of 2 whole columns walking up to the door. I had to move the door a little bit north, but it really didn't have an effect on anything. Now, hopefully this is the look at these fireplaces, because I was wondering as well. Okay, so I horsed around with this fireplace. This was really early, I guess. But whatever you do here, all these corners, that's going to have those factory built corners. And this is one layer, and I suppose that you can just finish that without corners here and here. And here, for that matter, no corners there. Even up here, although up underneath there might, I don't know. But yeah, you would have corners here, and on these edges here. And these edges step in some, and I come down on the side of these being in alignment here. This contemplates something that's flame-proof here, whether it's concrete. And what I also came down to was they do make a flame-proof thing called Flame X. I'm not sure what kind of various lumber they make, but they did make a 6x6. You'd have to buy a 12 or 16 foot piece of it for this 6 foot piece. And I don't know whether you can make that look right with your beams out here. But I contemplated using 2 steel lintels under here, and then this beam on top, whether that's wood or concrete. The idea is that all this is non-combustible, one way or another. And I have that only projecting about 1 inch from the face of this one here. And here, that section through it. And these are the 2 lintels, or the 2 angles, 2 angle pieces holding up that beam right here. And you can see them there. They're nothingness really except flame proofness, flame-proof material, and they would bear on that. I guess ultimately they would bear either on pieces of steel that's mounted behind here, or just bear on that cultured stone. But none of this is going to comply with their instructions, and I'll get to that, I believe, in a minute. None of that's going to comply with their directives, and I don't know what exactly that will do in terms of their warranty or a fire or any sort of thing like that. So I looked at this, as close as I could, because you know what kind of fire you're going to burn, etc. And you're the one that's going to be there. But nevertheless, A, we're not going to be able to show anything that the people that have to give us a permit might give us a headache about. But B, we don't want a headache in your own house. So when I looked at this, 46 inches to the bottom of a 12-inch deep non-combustible mantle, 12 inches deep. I took this diagram from up here, which is referring to non-combustible, combustible materials. But I took that same diagram and applied it to non-combustible materials as a clearance type of diagram, and moved it over here. This was just to get some sort of an idea, and I got their actual CAD of the side view, and put that diagram that they had for combustible materials in there. And when you if this was non-combustible, they would or if this was combustible, they would let you build anything in here if you were up at that 56 inches. But anyway, using that diagram, those are your two steel angles, and that's your beam there. And that beam's about 4 3/4 high by 3 3/4 wide, as shown. But one of the things to notice is this TV is intruding into that space that they only want non-combustible materials. The television is intruding down into that by about 3 inches. If we were to rely on this as any kind of a guide or rubric for thinking it's okay to build that there. And if we make that television, if we take that television down to 60 inches, then we have a little bit more. Then it's out of that, it's not down into that. It comes up enough out of that range of that apparent part that they like to have non-combustible. So that it scales down like that. That becomes a 60-inch TV, which means your ideal viewing area or viewing distance goes from about 8'10" to about 8'6" or 8'4". Yeah, I came down on the side of this regardless. Returning to this fireplace, this hearth, I brought this hearth out to 24 at the end of the day. 24 inches from the surface of this. After it being at 22 and 20 variously, I brought it out. This is still with the 65-inch arrangement. And that takes it down to a 60-inch arrangement. Also, I had things a little bit off kilter with regard to where that fireplace was. So these next photos are at least first accurate. 3, 4, or 5, perhaps. It was just that. Just looking at the fireplace, that chimney, the walkthroughs, and looking at we got to that point, columns or not out on that porch. Last is this series of walkthroughs, and I don't even know what some of them. I probably would know if I looked close enough, but each one of them has some
that I didn't
significant
care for as much
enough
at first.
changes. You probably should have a look.
Also, in an ongoing fashion, those doors.
I don't think I'll have to explain them, but I might. So if I don't, well, I'll talk to you the next time. Thank you.
Finally, there are several different beams at this porch ceiling review. There are at least 3 or 4 different types. And one of them you might not notice the change, but that trim at the very top goes from 3 inches to 2 inches at the top, and it makes me wonder about the trim all the way around the house. That's 3.5 inches, whether that should go down as well to 2.5, that top piece. As usual, I'm interrupting this film mid-film because going through all these fireplace photographs and the various rigmarole required to try to put something together that will accommodate that television. I just, this is just kind of over the top trying to accomplish something with that. And a lot of involvement and rigmarole. So I went and looked for this sort of thing, and I found exactly what I was looking for, really. There it is, up to 65 inches. And so we have to be able to go all the way up into that floor, so that's the next thing to quickly check. That needs 7 5/8. That needs to be clear above there. So I'm going to take a quick check just to see if something like this is even minimally, if this is doable. Because I think it's a better, possibly, I mean you may disagree, but I think it's a better endeavor than all of this. And you just have to look at this and imagine this with a very typical traditional fireplace or chimney of whatever width you want. Doesn't have to have these step ins and outs. I would still treat the top like this regardless, but then you just have one face, and we put whatever mantelpiece you want. It would have to go as high as that. You could put the mantelpiece in presumably at their recommended height, and it looks like there just is no TV in that room. If that 7 5/8 is available, and I don't know, I'll let you know here momentarily. Here we are then, and this is pretty brief and straightforward. That's the diagram, the scale diagram of their machine, and how close we could push it toward that chimney wall. That's the downstairs, and here it is upstairs, and you can see it's intruding on these walls that flank the skylights. And so the result is this. Move those over a little bit. Those alcoves become a little more narrow, 4 inches more narrow. The skylights are centered, but you can move this then either any of these directions this way, up and down, north and south. And here it is, pushed all the way back there, and the floor framing that would be required. These are probably going to be LVLs, two 8-inch LVLs. And then the rest of this can all be 16-inch single framing instead of these double 2x8s. And from the side, there's the existing TV on the wall, and here is this requirement up here of this 7 5/8 high box in the ceiling. And I've moved it forward some just because of the mechanism coming back, that you would have that kind of wherewithal. And there is the box up in the ceiling with the TV facing up like that, is apparently how it goes. When it comes down, this is the first time when it comes down, if you didn't get the extended one, it comes down just a little bit lower maybe than the one that we have currently mounted on that multifaceted fireplace front. And it extends down to there. But still you're at 65 inches. But don't forget, our latest video permutation had that at 60 inches. Or you'll see that upcoming if it hasn't already been shown in this film. And up there, there's still room for the spray foam insulation is going to play a pretty critical role, because all these roof planes framed with 2x8s. So I think they're going to be needed throughout the house at various points. Closed cell spray foam will be needed. This is the one that drops down and extends down as well. Right there. So you have that 1/4 seam all the way around, and the rest is pretty typical. And so there's the finished rendition of that with that 1/4 gap at the ceiling, shadow gap, and maybe it's more black looking, I don't know. But this mantelpiece, to meet what this manufacturer wants, believe it or not, that would have to go up another 15 inches to actually totally comply with what they want. And this one is shown 8 inches deep. So it actually only have to go about 12 more inches if it was 8 inches deep. I did come back the next morning and double check this mantelpiece to see if I was actually correct about that, having to go up so far to comply with this manufacturer's instructions or directives on that, which are here with the diagram and our diagram. And we get rid of those angle iron, and that flame-proof wood or concrete or whatever was used there in that interpretation. And I discovered once I moved this once I looked at everything, when we moved that wall forward for the first time into the interior of the building, that exterior wall wasn't adjusted at the same time. So that's been pulled up, and that was shown earlier in the film, the effect of that, which I think was to good result. But returning to the mantelpiece, then it would have to go, there's the diagram, that's where they want the combustible mantle located within that triangle or higher. And to get yours, to get this 2-inch slab in there, we are moving it up to 63, almost 64 inches to the bottom from the hearth, which is 64, 74, about 82 inches to the bottom, about the height of these doors. So we had to go up 16 3/8, so I was about correct about how extreme they are with that. And that's the end result of that. This thing on the ceiling would have to come forward some in that interpretation to come down in front of it. And the mantelpiece is shown projecting from that wall 8 inches in that interpretation. So I did want to double check it, and that is that. There's not a walkthrough with this high mantelpiece though. That's all. That's the last one. I'm not going to promise, but it should be the last one. Thank you. So that's that, and here I'm just going to interject this walkthrough right now with this situation, and then we'll return to the balance of the walkthroughs. Notice this foundation has become a lot more simple up at the edges of those little brick columns. I would actually have a full column on the left side there coming in with an air gap behind it, whatever that takes to accomplish that. Also keep in mind, I did not retract that hearth after I got rid of all that 3 inches in front. That hearth is still shown 3 inches deeper than it would, it's probably shown 27 inches deep from the face of that rock to the edge of the hearth. So that can probably be adjusted as you like. And now the rest of these walkthroughs made before all of that, with these sorts of fireplaces. But still reviewing those outside, the columns, whether out on the porch, the beam situation on the porch, different types of beams are shown out there, including ones that are identical to the ones in the kitchen. And finally, just so I can get this film pushed out the door, this doorway is also shown as a pocket door at some point, although I don't retract the pockets all the way. It's shown as a 48-inch pocket door, so you have 48-inch clear through there. And finally, on one of the very last films, the ceiling in the office and den is raised to 9 foot 1 1/8. Just one of those rooms. Both of them could be. This cuts that outside heel to about 9.5 inches, which is kind of a close call, but again, the spray foam could come into play there as well. At a certain point, I turned that wood on that ceiling parallel with the beams to have the idea that heavy joist would be up on top of that. But at the end, I liked it running parallel with the edge of the porch the long way. Either way, if beams are used out there, you can buy lumber so you won't have any seams in that material. And I thought sure I showed that planking on the porch ceiling running in the opposite direction, but running through this as quickly as I'm trying to, I didn't notice it. But no matter, I don't think it was an improvement over anything else. That's it. Thanks again. A couple of these walkthroughs I'm pretty sure were just put together to see how those trees, which were pretty approximately located outside from various things, how those were going to be, how that would feel from inside, how you would be able to see those, etc. And that's it for me. I'm all done talking. This film is almost over for you all. Thanks very much. I will talk to you the next time.